Welcome back to Preparing for the Collapse Radio. We are really glad to have you with us today. We're digging into a topic that I think is going to challenge a lot of the fundamental assumptions we make about safety, security, and even the American dream. But before we get rolling, I just want to say to everyone listening, if you think long-term about preparedness, this podcast is for you. We're all about getting you ready for whatever comes next.
It's good to be back. And you're right, today's discussion it's a bit of a paradigm shift. Usually we talk about how to fortify your position. Today we're asking a more dangerous question. Should you even have a fixed position?
Right. We're looking at a really compelling piece of writing today by author Spirit Walker, and we'll just call him Spirit throughout this. He wrote a piece called Why Mobile Living Makes More Sense in an Unstable Climate. And I have to tell you, reading this, it really shook up my idea of what a home is even supposed to be.
It's a powerful piece. It is, because it attacks the oldest assumption in civilization, that staying put equals safety. For generations, the goal has been to buy a plot of land, pour a concrete foundation, build a house, and just trust that the systems around you, the power grid, the water lines, the roads, will hold up forever.
Exactly. The white picket fence, putting down roots, that whole image of stability. But Spear is arguing that this image is actually becoming a trap. And honestly, looking at the news lately, it's hard to argue with him.
He opens by setting the scene of the world we're actually living in right now. Not the world of 50 years ago, but, the world of stronger storms, longer heat waves, faster moving fires, and floods appearing in places that never used to flood. He calls it the unstable climate. And his premise is that rigidity, being stuck in one spot, is a liability when the environment itself becomes volatile.
Yeah, he mentions people are feeling this shift in their bodies, that low-level anxiety when the wind picks up or the summer gets just a little too hot.
Yeah.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't the standard advice always to bug in?
Yeah.
Stockpile the basement, reinforce the doors, ride it out. Why does Spirit think that's the wrong play?
Because bugging in assumes the threat is temporary. It assumes the storm passes, the water recedes, the grid comes back on. Spirit argues that we're entering an era where the location itself might become the threat. If you're in a basement full of food, but that basement is in a flood zone that just expanded because of a 100-year storm that now happens every 5 years, well, your stockpile is underwater.
Or if you're fortified against looters, but the heat index hits 120 degrees and the grid fails.
Precisely. Your house becomes a convection oven. You're trapped in a box that requires massive amounts of energy just to keep it habitable. Spirit's main point is that in this kind of environment, adaptability is way more valuable than permanence. He argues that the solution isn't just stockpiling, it's mobility.
The ability to physically relocate.
Yes, when the conditions become dangerous.
And I love how he frames this. He's not talking about, running away or just drifting aimlessly. I think there's this stereotype of van life or living in a converted school bus, a schoolie, as being kind of irresponsible.
Or just checking out of society.
Right. But Spirit flips that completely.
He does. He calls it reading the land. This is really the core philosophy here. Spirit argues that mobile living actually requires more responsibility and more awareness than living in a suburban house.
That's interesting.
When you live in a stationary box, you just set the thermostat and kind of forget about the outside world. You're fighting the seasons.
Yeah. If it's hot, you crank the AC. If it's cold, you crank the furnace. You're totally disconnected from what's actually happening outside until the power goes out.
Exactly. But when you're mobile, in a van, an RV, a schoolie, whatever, you have to pay attention. Spirit writes that you have to watch the weather patterns, the terrain, the water access. You aren't locked into one climate zone. If you're in an area that's becoming fire-prone and smoke is filling the air, you don't have to stay and seal the windows. You can leave.
That's the aha moment for me.
Yeah.
The idea that mobility grants you the one thing stationary living denies you: choice.
Yes.
You can choose to move to higher ground before the flood hits. You can choose to move north when the heat wave settles in.
It changes your relationship with nature from a battle to a dance. Instead of fighting the winter in a place where the grid is straining, you relocate to a milder climate. You move with the seasons.
And Spirit makes a really interesting historical point here, too. He says this isn't some new, hipster fad. This is actually how humans live for the vast majority of our history.
It's an essential piece of context. Spirit reminds us that long before we had the power grid or centralized supply chains, human beings, including many Native American nations, were semi-nomadic. They didn't just wander aimlessly. They followed the resources, they followed the water, they moved to cooler regions in the summer and, protected valleys in the winter.
So the stationary experiment, the suburbs, the cities, that's actually the anomaly.
It's a blip on the timeline. Spirit says that the idea that safety comes from staying in one spot is actually a very recent experiment in human history, and it's an experiment that depends entirely on a stable climate.
Right.
When the climate stops being stable, that experiment fails. And the so-called primitive strategy of moving, it becomes the advanced strategy.
I want to drill down into why that experiment is failing. There's a section in the text where Spirit talks about how climate instability punishes rigidity.
Yeah.
It essentially comes down to infrastructure.
Right. This is where we get into the engineering of survival. Think about a modern house. It relies on long utility lines or at the end of a very long, very fragile wire.
You need the dam to generate the power, the transmission lines to carry it across the state, the substations, the transformer on your street.
And if any single link in that chain breaks,
The box dies.
Yeah.
If a storm knocks out a power line 50 miles away, your stationary home suddenly becomes a liability. No heat, no water, no way to cook. It becomes a freezing box or a sauna.
And Spirit compares this to a mobile dwelling. He talks about efficiency.
Right. Think about the energy physics of it. Heating a schoolie, a converted bus, with a wood stove takes a tiny, tiny fraction of the fuel it takes to heat a 2,500 square foot house.
You're heating what, 200 square feet versus 2,500?
Exactly. A handful of fallen branches can keep you warm all night.
Fan cooling?
Even simpler. If you're mobile, you can cool your space passively just by parking in the shade or driving to a higher elevation.
Oh, that makes sense.
A change in altitude of a few thousand feet can drop the temperature by 15 or 20 degrees. You're using geography and physics to solve the problem, not a fragile electric grid. It's just simpler. And in a collapse scenario, or even just a rough storm season, simplicity is resilience. But, and here's where I want to get practical, Christy, living in a vehicle isn't just about turning the key and driving off. You have to be prepared for that lifestyle.
You do. And this ties back to what we discuss so often on the show. You need to be equipped for the environment you're navigating. If you're going to be mobile, you're trading the insulation of a house for the flexibility of a vehicle. That means you have to manage your own microclimate.
Right. And looking at the gear lists available, specifically referring to the items from Nomadic Enterprises that we have up on the Preparing for the Collapse site, there's some really crucial stuff here. Let's talk about the cold first.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a van and the temp drops, you don't have central heating.
This is where specialized gear becomes an absolute lifesaver. You see items like the camper box down camping booties. That might sound like a luxury, but in a mobile setting where the floor just bleeds heat.
Especially in a vehicle.
Especially in a vehicle where the metal chassis is exposed to the cold air underneath, keeping your extremities warm is vital. You lose so much heat through your feet.
And if your feet are cold, your whole body feels it.
Well, yeah, and your body restricts blood flow to save your core. Your dexterity drops. In a survival situation, you need your hands and feet working, so insulating them from the cold floor is a safety measure, not just comfort.
And speaking of sleep, you can't just rely on a regular blanket. The store lists the Nature Hike Mummy sleeping bags. These are cotton-lined, designed for cold weather. Why the mummy shape specifically?
The Mummy design is all about thermal efficiency. A square sleeping bag has a lot of dead airspace around your legs and shoulders. Your body has to burn calories to heat up that empty air before it warms you.
I see.
A mummy bag fits tight to the body. It reduces the air volume you need to heat. It's highly efficient. You're essentially wearing your house.
And if you're using a hammock setup, which is great for mobility, keeps you off the wet ground, you need the down hammock underquilt. I've tried hammock camping without one, and let me tell you, cold butt syndrome is a real thing.
It is a real thing, and that's because of convection. In a hammock, you're suspended in the air. The wind just strips the heat right through the fabric underneath you.
And the sleeping bag gets compressed.
Right, your body weight compresses the insulation, rendering it useless. An underquilt hangs under the hammock, uncompressed. It traps that heat. It's a perfect example of how mobile living requires specific tools to maintain comfort and safety.
Now, beyond just staying warm, you need to be able to fix things. Spirit talks about how mobile living requires manual skills. You can't just call a handyman when you're 50 miles up a logging road.
No, you are the handyman. That's why having robust tools is non-negotiable. The outdoor heavy-duty multi-tool folding pliers are a staple. You need something that can cut wire, grip bolts, saw through a branch, open a can of food.
One tool, multiple jobs.
Exactly. Space is at a premium in a mobile rig, so one tool that does 12 things is better than a toolbox that takes up half your storage.
And for the bigger jobs, there's the Devil's Assault Axe.
Yeah.
I love the name. But functionally, if you're relying on a wood stove like Spirit mentions, you need a way to process fuel.
Absolutely. You need to process wood for heat. But also, think about mobility itself. If a storm knocks a tree across the only road out of the valley, that axe isn't for firewood.
It's your key to freedom.
It's your key to freedom. In a stationary house, a fallen tree is an inconvenience. In a mobile setting, if you can't move it, you're trapped. You need the means to cut your way out.
Let's talk about information. We talked about reading the land. Part of that is visual, but part of it is gathering data. You need to know what's happening.
That's where the Baofeng UV5R two-way radios come in. These are they're legendary in the prepper community for a reason.
They aren't just walkie-talkies.
No, not at all. They're powerful transceivers. They let you monitor NOAA weather bands to track storms. You can listen to local emergency frequencies, police, fire, EMS.
So you know what you're driving into.
Or what to drive away from. If you're heading toward a town and you hear chaos on the local bands, you know to turn around. And if you're traveling with a group of convoy, which Spirit recommends for security, it lets you coordinate. Bridge out ahead, road blocked, fuel stop needed.
In a mobile lifestyle, information is just as important as gasoline.
Absolutely. Information allows you to make decisions before you are in the crisis.
I also want to touch on the health and food aspect. People assume if you're mobile, you're just eating canned beans forever. But looking at the store listings, there's a huge focus on heirloom garden seeds and medicinal herbs.
This is a really interesting intersection of mobility and homesteading. Spirit suggests you can be mobile and still cultivate. We see seeds like squash and tomato.
And specifically, there are those plastic large flower pot boxes listed. So you can have a container garden on the roof of a bus or inside an RV near a window.
Right. It connects back to that idea of ancient wisdom. Even nomadic tribes gathered and managed plant resources. And the focus on medicinal herbs is crucial too. When you're on the road, you might be hundreds of miles from a pharmacy.
We're talking about things like organic Milan leaf and elderberries.
Milan is fantastic for respiratory issues. If you're near wildfire smoke, having a tea that helps clear the lungs is a medical necessity. Elderberries are for immune support. And then there's Usnea old man's beard.
That's the stuff that hangs off trees, right? A natural antibiotic.
It is. It grows on trees in clean air environments. Knowing how to identify it or having a stock of it is just another layer of biological insurance. It aligns perfectly with Spirit's philosophy. You are taking responsibility for your own survival systems.
You aren't outsourcing your health to a system that might be overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Let's shift back to the psychological side of this,
Yeah.
because I think that's the barrier for a lot of people. It's scary to leave the safety of a house. But Spirit argues that staying put is actually more stressful.
He creates a very vivid picture of the hidden stress of stationary living. Think about it. You're locked into a 30-year mortgage in an area that might be seeing insurance rates skyrocket because of flood risk. You feel trapped.
You're just watching the news, hoping the storm misses you, hoping the grid holds.
That feeling of helplessness, you're just waiting for someone else to save you.
Yeah.
Spirit argues that mobile living restores agency, and agency is the antidote to anxiety. When you know that if conditions change, you can just turn the key and move, your stress levels drop. You aren't waiting for a rescue, you are enacting your own plan.
You become an active participant in your own survival.
Yes.
That line in the text really stuck with me. Infrastructure is the weak point, not nature.
It's a profound shift in perspective, isn't it? Nature is intense, sure. But we survive nature by adapting. The problem is we've built these rigid, brittle systems infrastructure that collapse when nature gets intense. By using solar power, carrying your own water, using a composting toilet, you are removing the pressure points.
You're stepping out of the line of fire, essentially. When society hiccups, as he puts it, you don't collapse with it.
And that psychological freedom, that is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
You stop operating from a place of fear and start operating from a place of, well, of alignment with reality.
Now, for listeners who are hearing this and thinking, okay, I get the concept, but I need more details, I need the manual, we have resources for you.
We do. First off, check the Preparing for the Collapse blog and the YouTube channel. You need to see this stuff in action. Visual guides on off-grid living, tutorials on the gear we mentioned. It really helps to see how a solar setup is wired or how to pack a bug-out bag efficiently.
But if you really want to get into the weeds, and I know you do, you need to check out author Spirit Walker's book series. We are scratching the surface with this article, but the books are the blueprints.
Specifically, look for preparing for the collapse, prepare and maintain your bug-out bag, and bartering and trading.
The bug-out bag book is essential. Because even if you have a vehicle, there might be a scenario where you have to leave it. A mechanical failure, a blocked road, you need to be mobile on foot.
Exactly. That bag is your lifeboat. And bartering and trading, that's the economy of the future if the dollar takes a hit. Spirit goes into so much more depth in the books about the nuances of these interactions.
How to trade without becoming a target. What has real value.
All of it. What items have real value when credit cards don't work? The article is the why, but the books are the how.
And here's the good news. We are actually running a sale on the book series right now. If you want to get the full depth of Spirit's knowledge, check the description of this radio show. There's a link right there to purchase the series. Do not wait on that. Knowledge is the one thing that doesn't weigh anything in your pack.
And it's the one thing that truly makes you mobile.
As we wrap this up, I want to leave everyone with the final thought Spirit offers in the text. He says the question is shifting. It used to be, why would anyone live this way? Looking at someone in a van and thinking they were down on their luck.
And now, as we look at the grid straining, the costs spiraling, the weather changing, the question is becoming, why wouldn't you?
It's not about fear. It's about listening. Spirit says that mobility isn't an escape. It's an ancient skill that is returning at the exact moment history demands it again.
We're remembering how to be human in a wild world. And that's a hopeful thing. We aren't helpless. We're just rediscovering the tools we used for thousands of years.
It really is. Thank you all for tuning in to Preparing for the Collapse Radio. Check the links, get your gear sorted, and most importantly, stay adaptable. We'll see you next time.